Hai vợ chồng nghi ăn ngủ nói chung là sai khoa học, sai với xã hội luôn. Mọi người nghĩ sao hai vợ chồng tụ địch một cái người ta bẹt một chiếc tủ lạnh. Hai vợ chồng bà chị giữ ở bên á, rồi hai vợ chồng ở nhà chồng bấm game xuyên suốt. Mùa này leo ganh xuyên suốt cả nhà, không phải em nói không có hai đứa đó đem nói xấu, nhưng mà cái này là thật đúng không chị?
History often remembers the explosions, the fireballs over Pearl Harbor, the carrier duels at Midway, the mushroom clouds at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But sometimes, the fate of empires is decided at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But sometimes, the fate of empires is decided at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But sometimes, the fate of empires is decided at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But sometimes, the fate of empires is decided at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But sometimes, the fate of empires is decided at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But sometimes, the fate of empires is decided at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But sometimes, the fate of empires is decided at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But sometimes, the fate of empires is decided at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But sometimes, the fate of empires is decided at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But sometimes, the fate of empires is decided at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But sometimes, the fate of empires is decided at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But sometimes, the fate of empires is decided at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But sometimes, the fate of empires is decided at expansion was not choice. It was necessity. And inside your expansion was not choice. Fundamental The shock of Britain's military, the strike north faction, once powerful, lost its credibility. The shock of Britain, the dream of conquering Siberia faction, once powerful, lost its credibility. With Japan, the dream of conquering Siberia faction, not powerful, lost its against a mechanized superpower, the tanks of artillery, and was not powerful. So Japan moved south, the tanks of artillery toward colonies, toward the Pacific, so toward the United States. This is where Culkin quietly shaped history south, because when Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa in 1941, Japan expected to attack the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa, they didn't. Stalin, remembering Culkin goals, trusted that Japan would stay neutral. They didn't. Soviet division Stalin, remembering Culkin goals, trusted that Japan would stay neutral. Those troops helped stop the German advance. Meanwhile, Japan, those troops helped stop the German advance. Pacific. Meanwhile, for more than a year, from that moment on, Japan's fate was tied to the sea. But Japan was not built for a long industrial. Japan's fate, its ships could not match American production. Its pilots could not outplace passengers. Its economy was stretched to match American production. And every carrier someplace, every experienced economy stretched the empire closer to collapse. Every carrier all because one option, its enormous stretched and closed forever to collapse. By 1945, one empire that once dreamed of dominating Asia lay in ruins. By 1945, the Navy was gone. Once the army was isolating Asia, starving across distant islands. By 1945, remember Culkin. Once the army was no victory parade, starving, no famous speeches. Just a lesson famine in the grasslands. The army has no victory parade. Yet without that battle, history just a lesson very different to grasslands. A Japanese invasion of Siberia without a Soviet collapse, a different outcome in Europe. A Japanese invasion of Siberia. History does not always turn on the famous names or iconic moments. Sometimes it turns on a forgotten battles or iconic decision made. Sometimes silence turns on a forgotten. Culkin Gold did not end the Imperial Japan decision, but it made some silence, and that single defeat echoed all the way to Hiroshima. If you enjoy uncovering the forgotten chapters that shaped our world, consider subscribing for more immersive history stories. Uncovering the forgotten chapters that shaped our world. Consider subscribing for more immersive history stories. Uncovering the forgotten chapters that shaped our world. Consider subscribing for more immersive history stories. Uncovering the forgotten chapters that Japan's military leadership choice, fundamental questions divided the nation. Where should inside Japan's military leadership choice, fundamental two visions divided the nation. The strike north against Japan's destiny, Siberia to decisive war against the Soviet Union. Siberia promised resources, land, and the destruction of potential rivals. The strike south saw opportunity in Southeast Asia, oil-rich colonies, control. The strike south saw opportunity in both sides believed history was on their side. Both sides strike south war was inevitable. Both sides, but neither side expected sides. And sides come from a river called Intrigen. Both sides, but neither side expected was not meant to be sides come from. It was a quiet border region. Japanese controlled Manchuria was not Soviet to be anti-Gold. It was a place of grasslands, dust, wandering Manchuria. Maps disagreed on where the border. It was a place of grassland, but in May 1939, that ambiguity disagreed on where the border. It was a small Mongolian cavalry crossed what Japanese considered its territory. Japanese troops responded in cavalry shots crossed what Japanese considered what began as a border skirmish, spiraled into some far-large shots. Neither Tokyo nor Moscow began as a border skirmish, but both sent far-large shots, and neither Tokyo nor Moscow began. The two empires stood together, sent far-large shots, and the Japanese forces sighted the continent. They had crushed China's organization. They believed deeply the Japanese forces Japanese continent. They had crushed China's discipline, aggression, and the willingness to die, seen as weapons more powerful than tanks or artillery. Aggression, the Imperial Japanese Army, seen Soviet terror, they had tanks, still haunted by memories of Russia's planned Japanese concept, seen Soviet terror, but this time, to Soviet still haunted by different Russia's a general named Georgy Zhukov, but this time, Zhukov to Soviet flashed by different Russia's general and Georgy Zhukov in modern this time, Zhukov to Soviet, where Japanese commanders emphasized infantry assaults and courage. Zhukov emphasized coordination, where Japanese commanders armored, artillery, and air power working to emphasize coordination. That summer turned to autumn, both sides prepared for a decisive clash. The Japanese planned a bold defensive crossing the Khalkhin River and encircling Soviet forces. The Japanese pressed a bold defensive dare crossing the Khalkhin River, encircling Soviet forces. At dawn, the battle defensive dare crossing the Japanese infantry advanced under intense heat, charging forward the bayonets and machine guns. Japanese, for a moment, it seemed like the old ways still charging forward the bayonets and Soviets until Japanese, for a moment, shells tore into Japanese formations. Soviet aircraft screamed for bombing supply shells tore then changed its banks. Soviet aircraft screamed. Japanese anti-tank shells nearly non-existent. Their soldiers fought bravely. Sometimes desperate Japanese anti-tank would not stop stealing. Their soldiers fought bravely. Soviet forces Japanese anti-tank doubled non-stop. One of the largest mechanized units of Red Army Japanese troops. One of the largest mechanized units of Red Army. By the time the fighting Japanese September 1931, the result was unmistakable. By the time the fight lost September 1931, the entire unit ceased to exist. By the time veteran fight lost were dead thousands of men. For the first time in decades, Imperial Japan had suffered a decisive defeat, not against the collapsing decades, but against modern veteran mechanized armies, and the implications of the first terrifying decades. But against this wasn't just mechanized armies, it was proof that Japan could not defeat the Soviet Union. This wasn't just mechanized armies. Back in Tokyo, the Shah of Japan was military. The strike north faction, once powerful, lost its credibility. The Shah of Japan was military. The dream of conquering Siberia faction collapsed. Powerful lost its credibility. Japan had the dream of conquering Siberia faction collapsed. Power of a long step against the mechanized superpower had the tanks of artillery and was now power of a long step. So Japan Japan moved south toward oil artillery toward colonies toward the Pacific, and Japan moved United States toward oil artillery. This is where Gehalten quietly shaped world history south, because when Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa in 1941, Japan expected to attack the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa in 1941, Stalin, remembering Culkin Gold, trusted that Japan would stay neutral. Soviet division Stalin, remembering Culkin Gold, trusted that to defend Moscow neutral. Those troops helped stop German defense. Meanwhile, Japan those troops helped stop German navy Pacific. Meanwhile, a war that would begin at Pearl Harbor. From that moment on, Japan's fate was tied to the sea. But Japan was not built for a long industrial. Japan's fate, its shipyards could not match American, but Japan, its pilots could not outplace fast. Japan's fate, its economy was stretched to match American, but Japan, and its every carrier sunk place, every experience, its economy stretched to match American, closer to collapse. Every carrier all because one option, its enormous to stretch and closed forever to collapse. By 1945, the empire that once dreamed of dominating Asia lay in collapse. By 1945, the navy was gone. The army was isolated Asia, starving across distant islands. By 1945, the memory Culkin Gold, the army, no victory parade, starving, no famous passions, just a lesson buried in the grasslands. The army, no victory parade, yet without that famous passion, history just a lesson buried in the grasslands. A Japanese invasion of Siberia, yet without that Soviet collapse, just a different outcome in Europe. A Japanese invasion of Siberia, yet history does not always turn on the famous names or iconic moments. A Japanese sometimes it turns on a forgotten turn on forgotten battles or iconic decision made into silence. Turns on a forgotten. Culkin Gold did not end Imperial Japan decision, but it made into silence, and that single defeat echoed all the way to Hiroshima decision, but it made. If you enjoy uncovering the forgotten chapters that shaped our all the way, consider subscribing for more immersive history stories. Uncovering the forgotten chapters that shaped our all the way. Consider subscribing for more immersive history stories. Uncovering the forgotten chapters that shaped our all the way. Consider subscribing for more immersive history stories. Uncovering the forgotten chapters that shaped our all the way. Consider subscribing for more immersive history stories. Hiroshima and Nagasaki are all. Consider subscribing for the face of empire mushrooms. Hiroshima and Nagasaki are all. Consider subscribing for the face of empire mushrooms. Most people never heard of. In the summer of 1939, on a remote river mushrooms Mongolia, never heard of Imperial Japan summer of so profound no declaration of war, so profound just no declaration of war, and that lesson helped decide the course just no declaration. At the end of the 1930s, the world stood on the edge of catastrophe. Europe was around. At the end of the Nazi Germany's expanded, the Soviet Union watched the world where Europe was around. And on Asia, Imperial Japan was already watched the world. Since 1937, Japan had been walking Imperial Japan so China. Its armies marched in. Since 1947, cities and railways, convinced that victory was only a matter of its armies marched in. Yet to capture confidence, there was anxiety that victory was Japan was an island empire with limited resources. No oil, no iron, no rubber. Japan's expansion was not a choice. Limited resources. No oil, no iron, no rubber. And inside Japan's military leadership, a fundamental question divided the nation. Where should inside Japan's military leadership, a fundamental two visions divided the nation. The strike force action against Japan's destiny lay in Siberia. Two decisive nation against the Soviet Union action. Siberia promised resources and land, and the destruction of potential Soviet Union action. The strike south saw opportunity in Southeast Asia, oil-rich colonies controlled by the strike south saw opportunity in both sides believed history both sides what neither side expects. And sides come from a river called Khaltun Gol. Both sides what neither Khaltun Gol was not meant to be sides come from. It was a quiet border region between Japanese controlled Manchuria and Soviet Allied Gol. It was a place of grasslands, dust, wandering Manchuria. Maps disagreed on where the border. It was a place of grasslands, but in May 1939, that ambiguity turned dead. A small Mongolian cavalry crossed what Japanese considered its territory. Japanese troops responded in cavalry shots crossed what Japanese considered what began as a border skirmish, spiraling into something far large shots. Neither Tokyo nor Moscow began as a border skirmish, but both sending far large shots, and neither Tokyo nor Moscow began the two empires stood by sending far large shots, and the Japanese forces signed they crushed China's ascension. They believed the Japanese forces Japanese they crushed China's discipline, aggression, and the willingness to die are seen as weapons more powerful than tanks or artillery. Aggression, the Imperial Japanese Army, sees Soviet military tanks still haunted by memories of Russia's Imperial Japanese Army, Soviet military, but this time the Soviets still haunted by different Russia's a general named Georgy Zhukov, but this time Zhukov the Soviets flashed them by different Russia's general and Georgy Zhukov in modern this time Zhukov the Soviets where Japanese commanders emphasized infantry assaults and courage. Zhukov emphasized coordination where Japanese commanders armed artillery and air working to emphasize coordination where that summer turned to armed both sides prepared for a decisive clash. The Japanese planned a bold defensive crossing the Khalkhin River and encircling Soviet forces. The Japanese pressed a bold defense dare crossing the Khalkhin River, encircling Soviet forces. At dawn, the battle defense dare crossing the Khalkhin Japanese infantry advanced under intense heat, charging for the bayonets and machine guns. Japanese for a moment advanced like the old ways, still charging for the bayonets and Soviet artillery. Japanese for a moment shells tore into Japanese formations. Soviet aircraft screamed for bombing supply shells tore into Japanese formations. Soviet aircraft screamed. Japanese anti-tank shells were nearly non-existent. Their soldiers fought bravely, sometimes desperate. Japanese anti-tank would not stop steam. Their soldiers in days, the Soviet forces Japanese massive double stop. One of the largest mechanized brigades of Red Army massive Japanese troops. One of the largest mechanized brigades of Red Army. By the time the fighting Japanese, September 1939, the result was unmistakable. By the time the fight lost, September 1939, the entire units ceased to exist. By the time veteran officers were dead, thousands of men. For the first time in decades, Imperial Japan suffered a decisive defeat, not against first time decades, but against modern veteran mechanized armies, and the implications of first time decades, but against this wasn't just a battlefield loss. It was proof that Japan could not defeat the Soviet Union. This wasn't just a battlefield loss. Back in Tokyo, the Shah of Japan could not defeat the Soviet. The Strike North faction, once powerful, lost its credibility. The Shah of Japan could not defeat. The dream of conquering Siberia faction, once powerful, lost its credibility. The Shah of Japan had the dream of conquering Siberia faction, could not tower among long step against a mechanized super Japan had the tanks of artillery and the space tower among long step. So Japan looked south the tanks of artillery toward colonies toward the Pacific. So Japan looked the United States toward artillery. This is where Khalkhin quietly shaped history. Because when Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa in 1941, Japan expected to attack the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa, they didn't. Stalin, remembering Khalkhin goals, trusted that Japan would stay neutral. Soviet division Stalin, remembering Khalkhin goals, trusted that Japan would stay neutral. Those troops helped stop the German advance. Meanwhile, Japan goes through different kinds of storms, tornadoes, Pacific. Meanwhile, a war that begins through different kinds of storms. From that moment on, Japan's fate was tied to the sea. But Japan was not built for a long industrial Japan's fate. Its shipyards could not match America, but Japan, its pilots could not replace fast. Japan's its economy was stretched to match America, but Japan, its every carrier sunk, every experience its economy to stretch the empire closer to collapse. Every carrier all because one option, its enormous to stretch and closed forever to collapse. By 1945, the empire that once dreamed of dominating Asia lay in collapse. By 1945, the navy was gone. Once the army was isolated Asia, starving across distant islands. By 1945, the remembered conquered. Once the army was isolated Asia, starving no famous solutions. Just a lesson abandoned in the grassland. Once the army no victory. Yet without that battle, history must be a lesson there in the grassland. A Japanese invasion of Siberia, yet without that Soviet collapse, a different outcome in the grassland. A Japanese invasion of Siberia. History does not always turn on the famous names or iconic moments. A Japanese sometimes it turns on a forgotten battles or iconic decision made some to silence. It turns on a forgotten. Kalkin Gold did not end the Imperial Japan decision, but it made some to silence. And that single defeat echoed all the way to Hiroshima decision, but it made. If you enjoy uncovering the forgotten chapters that shaped our all the way, consider subscribing for more immersive history stories. Uncovering the forgotten chapters that shaped our all the way. Consider subscribing for more immersive history stories. Uncovering the forgotten chapters that shaped our all the way. Consider subscribing for more immersive history stories. Explore the forgotten chapters that shaped our all the way. Consider subscribing for more immersive history mushrooms. Explore the Hiroshima chapters that shaped our all the way. Consider subscribing for more immersive history mushrooms. Explore the Hiroshima chapters that shaped our all the way. Consider subscribing for more immersive history mushrooms. Never heard of. In the summer of 1939, on a remote riverbed in Mongolia, never heard of Imperial Japan summer of 1939 so profound that most no declaration of war, so profound that just no declaration of war, and that lesson what decided course just no declaration. At the end of the 1930s, the world stood on which catastrophe. Europe was unraveled. At the end of the Nazi Germany was expanded, stood a Soviet unit and watched the world where Europe was unraveled. Not Asia, Imperial Japan was already and watched the world. Since 1937, Japan had been walking the Imperial Japan so China. Its armies marched in. Since 1957, cities and railways, convinced that victory was only a matter of its armies marched in. Yet with confidence, there was anxiety that victory was Japan was an island empire with limited resources. Confidence, no oil, there was no iron, no rubber. Japan expansion was not a choice. Limited resources, no oil, no iron, no rubber. And inside Japan's military leadership, fundamental questions divided the nation. Where should inside Japan's military leadership, fundamental two visions divided the nation. The strike force faction against Japan's destiny lay in Siberia. Two decisive nation against the Soviet Union faction. Siberia promised resources, land, and the destruction of potential Soviet Union faction. The strike south saw opportunity in Southeast Asia to strike oil-rich colonies controlled by the strike south saw opportunity. Both sides believed history was on their side. Both sides believed war was inevitable. Both sides what neither side expected. And sides come from a war was inevitable. Both sides what neither side expected was not meant to be sides come from. It was a quiet border region. Japanese controlled Manchuria was not Soviet alliance on Gold. It was a place of grasslands, dust, wandering Manchuria. Maps disagreed on where the border. It was a place of grassland. But in May 1939, that ambiguity determined on where the border. A small Mongolian cavalry 1930 crossed what Japanese considered its territory. They crushed China's armies. They believed deeply in Japanese forces and Japanese spirit. They crushed China's discipline, aggression, and the willingness to die were seen as weapons more powerful than tanks or discipline, aggression. The Imperial Japanese Army was seen as weapons more powerful than tanks, still haunted by aggression. Russia's Imperial Japanese Army was seen as weapons, but this time the Soviets still haunted by aggression. Russia's a general named Georgy Zhukov, but this time Zhukov, the Soviets still haunted by aggression. Russia's a general named Georgy Zhukov in modern this time Zhukov, the Soviets, where Japanese commanders emphasized in general assaults and courage. Zhukov emphasized coordination, where Japanese infantry, armor, artillery, and airmen working to emphasize coordination, where as summer turned to armor, both sides and air a decisive clash. The Japanese planned a bold defensive arms crossing the Khalkhin River and encircling Soviet forces. The Japanese pressed a bold defensive dare crossing the Khalkhin River, encircling Soviet forces. At dawn, the battlefield dare crossing the Japanese infantry advanced under intense heat, charging for the bayonets and machine guns. Japanese for a moment seemed like the old ways still charging for the bayonets and Soviets until Japanese for a moment shells tore into Japanese formations. Soviet aircraft screamed overhead for bombing supply shells tore into Japanese formations. Soviet aircraft screamed overhead. Japanese anti-tank shells nearly non-existent. Their soldiers fought bravely. Sometimes desperate Japanese anti-tank would not stop stealing. Their soldiers fought bravely. The Soviet forces executed a massive double stops. One of the largest mechanized maneuvers of Red Army ever executed a massive Japanese troops stops. One of the largest mechanized maneuvers of Red Army ever executed. By the time the fighting Japanese September 1931, the result was unmistakable. By the time the fight lost September 1931, the entire unit ceased to exist. By the time veteran officers were dead, the strength of men. For the first time in decades, Imperial veterans suffered a decisive strength of men, not against the collapsing empire, but against the modern veteran mechanized army, decisive and the implications of the collapsing empire, but against this wasn't just a battlefield loss. It was proof that Japan could not defeat the Soviet Union, because this wasn't just a battlefield loss. Back in Tokyo, the Shah of Britain could not defeat the Soviet. The Strike North faction, once powerful, lost its credibility. The Shah of Britain could not defeat. The dream of conquering Siberia faction, once powerful, lost its credibility. The Shah of Britain. Japan had the dream of conquering Siberia faction, could not tower a prolonged step against a mechanized superpower and the tanks of artillery and was not tower a prolonged step. So Japan stood south the tanks of artillery toward colonies toward the Pacific. So Japan stood south states. This is where Khalkhin quietly shaped so history. Because when Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa in 1941, Japan expected to attack the Soviet Union from the east. Because when Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, Stalin, remembering Khalkhin goal, Japan expected to attack the Soviet Union. Because when Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, Stalin west to defend Moscow, expected those troops helped stop. Because when Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, Japan felt Moscow different than Japan. Those troops helped stop. Because when Hitler launched Operation war that would begin, Japan felt Moscow different. From that moment on, Japan's fate was tied. But Japan was not built to prolong industrial different. From that moment, its shipyards could not match its pilots could not replace fast to prolong. Its economy was stretched to the its shipyards could not match every experienced place fast to push its economy was stretched to the shipyards all because one army of North had closed forever pushed its economy. By 1945, the empire everyone dominated Asia lay and closed. Cities burned. The name was gone. Armed ISIL starved distant islands and few remember the Khalkhin goal. The name no victory parade. Armed ISIL starved just arrested advance and grasp the few and then sickle people. Yet without that battle, history might miss. A Japanese invasion of Siberia, a Soviet collapse, without that different outcome might miss. A different outcome. A Jap history does not always turn on a famous names or iconic different outcome. Sometimes it turns on a forgotten. A Jap history does not always turn on a famous names or iconic sites. Sometimes Kalkin turns not end imperial history does not battle, but it doomed a decision, and that single deceit echoed all the way to Hiroshima. If you enjoy uncovering the forgotten chapters that shaped our world, consider subscribing for more immersive history stories like this one. If you enjoy uncovering the forgotten chapters that shaped our world, consider subscribing for more immersive history stories like this one. If you enjoy uncovering the forgotten chapters that shaped our world, consider subscribing for more immersive history stories. If you enjoy uncovering the mushroom history of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, consider subscribing for more immersive history. The fate of Hiroshima is decided by the mushroom history of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Consider subscribing for more immersive history. The fate of Hiroshima is decided by in the summer of 1936 on a remote riverbank in Imperial Japan suffered so profound as to reshape its entire no declaration of fate suffered so profound just as he shaped its entire and that declaration of failed to decide the course so just as he shaped at the end of the 1930s and that was the edge of catastrophe course. Europe was around. Nazi Germany was expanded in 1930s. The Soviet Union had watched from the edge where catastrophe course. And Asia, the Imperial Japan was also expanded in 1930s. The Soviet Union since 1937, Japan has embarked in a brutal Asia, China. Its armies marched inland, capturing cities in 1937, convinced that victory was only a matter of time. China. Yet its armies constantly there was anxiety. Japan was an island empire with limited resources, no oil, no iron, no rubber. There was expansion was not a choice. It was limited necessity. And inside Japan's military leadership, a fundamental question divided the nation. Where should the empire expand? And inside Japan's military leadership, visions, fundamental question to strike your nation. Japan's destiny lay in Siberia, a decisive war against the Soviet Siberia promised resources, land destiny, and the destruction of potential by decisive war. Yet a strike south saw opportunity in Southeast Asia, oil-rich colonies controlling potential by European empires. Yet a strike south, both sides opportunity history was on their side. Both sides believed war was inevitable. What neither side, both sides opportunity history answers each come from a river. Both sides believed war was inevitable. Kalkin Gold was not meant to both sides. It was a quiet border region between Japanese controlled Manchuria and Soviet Gold was not meant a place of grassland. It was dust, wandering birds. Japanese maps disagreed on where the border was. But in May 1939, it was that ambiguity returned. Japanese maps disagreed. A small Mongolian cavalry patrol crossed the Japanese Pacific. It was that ambiguity. Japanese troops responded. A shots were fired. What began as a border skirmish is spiraling into something Japanese troops responded. Neither Tokyo nor Moscow officially declared war. What began as a border skirmish is spiraling into something slowly. Neither Tokyo nor Moscow officially declared war. What began as a border skirmish. The Japanese forces they had crushed Chinese armies. They believed deeply in the superiority of Japanese forces, satiated conflict, dissipated aggression, and the willingness to die were seen as weapons more powerful than the Japanese forces, satiated conflict. The inferior Japanese army and the Soviet military were seen as weapons still haunted by Japanese forces until last in 1970. The inferior Japanese army, but this time the Soviets said something different. Still a general Japanese war, Georgi Zhukov, 1970. Zhukov was not flashed. The Soviets said something different. Japanese commanders emphasized infantry assaults and courage, emphasized coordination of infantry, armor, artillery, and air infantry working together. As summer turned to August, both sides prepared for a decisive clash. The Japanese planned a bold offensive, crossing the Kalkin-Gold River and encircling Soviet forces decisive and aggressive. The Japanese planned a bold offensive, crossing the Kalkin-Gold River and encircling at dawn the battlefield was aggressive. The Japanese infantry advanced under intense heat, charging forward with bayonets at dawn the battlefield. For a moment, the Japanese old ways still worked. Then Soviet artillery shells poured into Japanese formations. Soviet aircraft screamed revenge, bombings of flightlines. Then shells poured hundreds of the Japanese anti-tank weapons were nearly non-existent. Their soldiers fought bravely, sometimes desperate hundreds, but bravely not stopped. Nearly non-existent. In days, the Soviet forces executed a massive double envelopment, one of the largest mechanized maneuvers the Red Army had ever done. The soldiers and the Japanese troops used a double envelopment, then one of the largest mechanized maneuvers. By the time the fighting ended, September 19th, Japanese troops, the result was unmistakable. Japan had lost. By the time the fighting ended, September 19th, Japanese ceased to exist as unmistakable. Veteran officers were Japan disgraced. By the time, for the first time in decades, Imperial Japan suffered a decisive veteran officers were not against a collapsing empire, but against a modern, mechanized army. Suffered implications terrifying. Not against a because this wasn't just a battle time lost. It was clear that Japan could not defeat the Soviet Union. Not against a because this wasn't just Tokyo. The shock rippled its military. The strike north faction, once powerful, had lost its credibility. Back to Tokyo, the dream of conquering Siberia collapsed. The strike north faction, once powerful, had lost. Japan had learned valuable lessons. The dream could not win Siberia long collapsed. A mechanized superpower with tanks, artillery, and command lessons. The dream could not so Japan looked south toward mechanized superpower, toward colonies, artillery, toward the Pacific, and toward the United States. Japan looked south. This is where Kalkin-Gold, quiet, calm shape history sits. Because when Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa in 1940, this is where Japan expected to attack the Soviet Union from the east. Because when Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, Stalin, remembering Kalkin-Gold, Japan expected Japan attack state neutrality. Soviet divisions were pulled from Siberia, Stalin west to defend Japan. Those troops helped stop Soviet Germans pulled from Siberia. Meanwhile, Japan prepared for a different country. Those troops may help stop Soviet Germans pulled from Siberia. A war that would begin Japan prepared for a different. From that moment on, Japan's fate was tied to the sea. But Japan was not built for a long industrial war. From that moment, its shipyards could not match American production. Its pilots could not be placed fast for a long. Its economy was stretched to the its shipyards could not match every carrier sunk. Every experienced placed fast pushed its economy close stretched to collapse. All because one archer sunk. The North Pass had closed forever. Pushed its economy. By 1945, the empire, once dreamed of dominating Asia, lay and closed. Cities burned. The name was gone. The armed empire, once starved of distant islands, lay and few remember Kalkin-Gold. The name no victory parade, armed no ISIS speech, starved just a lesson advancing and grasped few remember Kalkin-Gold. Yet without that victory parade, history might look very different. Just a lesson. A Japanese invasion of Siberia, a Soviet collapse. Yet without that different outcome, might look a different world. Just a lesson. A Jap history does not always turn on famous names or iconic moments. Outcome. Sometimes it turns on a forgotten a Jap history does not always turn on a decision or iconic sites. Sometimes Kalkin-Gold does not end the imperial history forgotten battle, but it doomed to decision, and that single defeat echoed all the way to Hiroshima history stories like this one. If you enjoy uncovering the forgotten chapters that shaped our world, consider subscribing for more immersive history stories like this one. If you enjoy uncovering the forgotten chapters that shaped our world, consider subscribing for more immersive history stories like this one. If you enjoy uncovering the mushroom history of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, consider subscribing for more immersive history. The fate of the empire is decided by the mushroom history of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Consider subscribing for more immersive most fate of the empire is decided by in the summer of 1939 on a remote riverbed in Mongolia. Most fate of the empire suffered so in the summer and reshaped its entire riverbed. No declaration of fate of the empire suffered so just reshaped its entire riverbed. And no declaration of helped decide the course World War II just at the end of the 1930s, the world stood on the edge of a catastrophic force. Europe was around. Nazi Germany was expanding. The Soviet Union had watched from the edge where it passed. And Asia, Imperial Japan was expanding. The Soviet Union since 1937, Japan has been locked in a brutal Asia. China, its armies marched in, captured cities since 1937, convinced that victory was only a matter of time. Yet its armies constantly there was anxiety since 1937. Japan was an island empire of limited resources. No oil, no iron, rubber. There was expansion was not a choice. Island empire seemed necessity. And inside Japan's military leadership, a fundamental question divided the nation. Where should the empire expand? And inside Japan's military leadership, visions, fundamental question, the strike or reaction, Japan's destiny lay in Siberia. Inside a decisive military leadership, Siberia promised resources, land destiny, and the destruction potential by decisive military leadership. The strike south saw opportunity in Southeast Asia, oil-rich colonies controlled by European empires. The strike south, both sides opportunity history was on their side. Both sides of the controlled by the Netherlands empires. What neither side saw opportunity history answers come from a river. Both sides of the controlled by the Netherlands. Khalkhin Gol was not missed. It was a quiet border region between Japanese-controlled Manchuria and Soviet. Khalkhin Gol was not missed. A place of grasslands. It was a quiet wandering herds. Japanese maps disagreed on where the border was. But in May 1939, that ambiguity turned. Japanese maps disagreed. A small Mongolian cavalry crossed the Japanese Pacific. It's that ambiguity. Japanese troops responded. A shots were fired. What began as a border skirmish spiraled into something. Japanese troops responded. Neither Tokyo nor Moscow officially declared war. What began as a boat skirmish spiraled into something slowly. Neither Tokyo nor Moscow officially declared war. What began as a boat skirmish. The Japanese forces they had crushed Chinese armies. They believed deeply in the superiority of Japanese forces in Satian conflict. They had crushed Chinese and the willingness to die were seen as weapons more powerful than the Japanese or Satian conflict. The Imperial Japanese army and the Soviet military were seen as weapons still haunted by Japanese force until last 1970. The Imperial Japanese army, but this time the Soviets said something different. Still a general Zhukov was found, but this time the Soviets said something different. And still a general in the where Japanese commanders emphasized infantry assaults and courage, Zhukov emphasized coordination, infantry, armor, Japanese commanders and air infantry working together. Zhukov, as summer turned to August, both sides prepared for a decisive clash. The Japanese planned a bold offensive, crossing the Khalkhin Gol River and encircling Soviet forces decisive and aggressive. The Japanese planned a bold offensive, crossing the Khalkhin Gol River and encircling at dawn the battlefield was aggressive. Japanese infantry advanced under 10 feet, charging forward with bayonets at dawn the battlefield. For a moment, its Japanese old ways still worked. shells roared to Japanese formations, and soaked aircraft screamed vengeance, bombings of pylons, then shells roared excessive hundreds, and soaked the Japanese anti-tank weapons were nearly non-existent. Their soldiers fought bravely, sometimes desperate hundreds, but bravely the Japanese anti-tank weapons were nearly non-existent. In days, the Soviet forces executed a sometimes double undeveloped, but one of the largest mechanized maneuvers the Red Army had ever made. The Soviet and Japanese troops were double undeveloped, and then one of the largest mechanized maneuvers. By the time the fighting ended in September 1939, troops, the result was unmistakable. Then one of the Japan had lost. By the time the fighting ended in September 1939, ceased to exist. Veteran officers were dead and disgraced. By the time, for the first time in decades, Imperial Japan had suffered a decisive veteran officers were not against a collapsing empire, but against a modern, mechanized army. And the implications were terrifying. Not against a because this wasn't just a battlefield lost at it was clear that Japan could not defeat the Soviet Union in a land because this wasn't just Tokyo, the Shah rippled its military. The strike north faction, once powerful, lost its credibility. Back in Tokyo, the dream of reconquering Siberia collapsed. The strike north faction, once powerful, lost. Japan had learned valuable lessons. It could not win Siberia long collapsed. Its mechanized superpower, tanks, artillery, and lessons. It could not. So Japan looked south, mechanized superpower toward colonies, artillery toward the Pacific, and toward the United States. Japan looked south. This is where culture, quiet, calm shape artillery history because when Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa in 1941, Japan expected to attack the Soviet Union from the east. Because when Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, Stalin, remembering Kulkin's goal, Japan expected Japan attack the Soviet Union. Soviet divisions were pulled from Siberia, Stalin west to defend Moscow. Japan, those troops helped stop Soviet Germany from Siberia. Meanwhile, Japan prepared for a different kind. Those troops may help stop Soviet Germany. A war that would begin Japan prepared different. From that moment on, Japan's fate was tied to the sea. But Japan was not built for a long industrial different. From that moment, shipyards could not match American production. Its pilots could not replace built for a long. Its economy was stretched to the limit. Shipyards could not match every carrier sunk. Its pilots could not place fast to push its economy close stretched to the limit. Shipyards all because one airship sunk. The North Pass had been closed forever. Its economy by 1945, the empire once dreamed of dominating Asia lay and would close. Cities burned. The navy was gone. The armed empire once starved of dominating distant islands lay and fumed. Remember Sikal Bengal. The name no victory parade. Armed no ISIS once starved just a lesson bears and grass the fume. Remember Sikal Bengal. Yet without that victory parade, history might look starved just a lesson. A Japanese invasion of Siberia. A Soviet collapse. A different outcome. A different world. A Jap history does not always turn on famous names or iconic moments. Sometimes it turns on a forgotten war. Jap history does not always turn on a famous names or iconic sites. Sometimes Kulkin turns not end the imperial history forgotten battle, but it doomed to decision, and that single defeat echoed all the way to Hiroshima. Not end the imperial history. If you enjoy uncovering the forgotten chapters that shaped our world, consider subscribing for more immersive history stories like this one. If you enjoy uncovering the forgotten chapters that shaped our world, consider subscribing for more immersive history stories like this one. If you enjoy uncovering the forgotten chapters that shaped our world, consider subscribing for more immersive history stories. The carriers, if you enjoy uncovering the mushroom history of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, consider subscribing for more immersive history stories. The fate of the carriers is decided by the mushroom history of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Consider subscribing for more immersive history. Most fates of the carriers is decided in the summer of 1936 on a remote riverbed in Mongolia. Imperial Both sides believed that history was on their side. Both sides believed Jahre was a network of empires. What neither side expected was history. Answer come from a river. Both sides believed Jahre was a network. Kalkin gold was not meant to be expected. It was a quiet border region between Japanese-controlled Manchuria and Soviet gold was not meant to be a place of grasslands. It was dust, wandering herds. Japanese maps disagreed on where the border was. But in May 1939, that ambiguity turned. Japanese maps disagreed. A small Mongolian cavalry crossed the Japanese Pacific. It's that ambiguity. Japanese troops responded. Shots fired cavalry. What began as a border skirmish spiraled into something. Japanese troops responded. Neither Tokyo nor Moscow officially declared war. What began as a border skirmish spiraled into something. Slowly, sidestepped. Neither Tokyo nor Moscow officially declared war. What began as a border said the Japanese forces conflict. They had crushed Chinese armies. They believed deeply in the superiority of Japanese forces stationed conflict. Dissipated aggression and the willingness to die were seen as weapons more powerful than tanks or artillery. The anticipated Japanese army and the Soviet military were seen as weapons still haunted by Japanese forces to last in 1970. Anticipated Japanese army, but this time the Soviets said something different. Still a general Japanese war ruled by Zhukov. This time the Soviets said something different. Still a general where Japanese commanders emphasized infantry assaults and courage, Zhukov emphasized coordination, infantry, armor, artillery, and air infantry working together. Zhukov, as summer turned to August, both sides prepared for a decisive clash. The Japanese planned a bold offensive, crossing the Kalkin-Dol River and encircling so far was decisive and aggressive. The Japanese planned a bold was exactly crossing the Kalkin-Dol River and encircling at dawn. The battlefield was aggressive. Japanese infantry advanced under 10 charging forward with bayonets at dawn. The battlefield. For a moment, its Japanese old way advanced worked. Then Soviet artillery at dawn. Shells were lowered to Japanese formations. Soviet aircraft screamed over bombing supply lines. Then shells were lowered to hundreds. Soviet Japanese anti-tank weapons were nearly non-existent. Their soldiers fought brave, sometimes desperate hundreds, but bravely Japanese anti-tank weapons were nearly non-existent. Within days, the Soviet forces executed a massive double but one of the largest mechanized maneuvers the Red Army had ever days. The Soviets and the Japanese troops were surrounded, and then one of the largest mechanized maneuvers. By the time the fighting ended in September 19, Japanese troops, the result was unmistakable. One of the Japan had lost. By the time the fighting ended in September, the entire Japanese ceased to exist as unmistakable. Veteran officers were dead and disgraced. By the time, for the first time in decades, the entire Imperial Japan suffered a decisive veteran officers not against a collapsing empire, but against a modern mechanized army, and the implications were terrifying. Not against a collapsing this wasn't just a battlefield lost at mechanized army that Japan could not defeat the Soviet Union in a not against a collapsing. This wasn't just Tokyo, the Shah rippled its military. The strike north faction, once powerful, had lost its credibility. Back in Tokyo, the dream of reconquering Siberia collapsed. The strike north faction, once powerful, had lost. Japan had learned valuable lessons. The dream could not win Siberia long collapsed against a mechanized superpower. Powerful tanks, artillery had learned endless lessons. It could not so Japan looked south against a mechanized superpower toward colonies, artillery toward the Pacific, and toward the United States. Japan looked south. This is where Kalkin-Dol, quiet, calm shape of history sits. Because when Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa in 1940, this is where Japan expected to attack the Soviet sit from peace because when Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, Stalin, remembering Kalkin's goal, Japan trusted that Japan tax states neutrality. Soviet divisions were pulled from Siberia, Stalin west to defend Moscow. Japan, those troops helped stop Soviet Germans pulled from Siberia. Meanwhile, Japan prepared for a different country. Those troops may help stop Soviet Germans a war that would begin Japan prepared for a different country. From that moment on, Japan's fate was tied to the sea. But Japan was not built for a long industrial war. From that moment, its shipyards could not match American production. Its pilots could not place fast for a long. Its economy was stretched to the limit. Shipyards could not match every carrier sunk. Its every experienced place fast for a long. Its economy was stretched to the limit. Shipyards could not match every carrier sunk. The North had closed forever. Its economy by 1945, the empire, once dreamed of dominating Asia, lay and closed. Cities burned. The name was gone. The armed ISIL, once starved of dominating distant islands, lay and fumed from them Sikalkingo. The name no victory parade. Armed no ISIL speech starved just a lesson advance and grasped fumed from them Sikalkingo. Yet without that victory parade, history might look very different. Just a lesson. A Japanese invasion of Siberia, a Soviet collapse. Yet without that different outcome, history might look a different world. A Jap history does not always turn on famous names or iconic different outcomes. Sometimes it turns on a forgotten war. Jap history does not always turn on a decision or iconic sites. Sometimes Kalkin turns not end the imperial history forgotten battle, but it doomed to decision, and that single defeat echoed all the way to Hiroshima. Not end the imperial history. If you enjoy uncovering the forgotten chapters that shaped our world, consider subscribing for more immersive history stories like this one. If you enjoy uncovering the forgotten chapters that shaped our world, consider subscribing for more immersive history stories like this one. If you enjoy uncovering the forgotten chapters that shaped our world, consider subscribing for more immersive history stories. If you enjoy uncovering the mushroom history of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, consider subscribing for more immersive history. The fate of empires is decided by the mushroom history of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Consider subscribing for more immersive history. Most fates of empires is decided in the summer of 1985 on a remote riverbank in Mongolia. Imperial Japan suffered soaked in the summer and reshaped its no declaration of state. Summer soaked in just reshaped its and that declaration of state helped decide the course. World War II just at the end of the 1930s, the world stood on the edge of a catastrophic course. Europe was around just Nazi Germany has expanded the 19th Soviet Union and watched from the edge of a catastrophic course. And Asia, Imperial Japan was already in the 19th Soviet Union. Since 1937, Japan has been locked in Asia, China. Its armies marched in the 19th, capturing cities since 1937, convinced that victory was only a matter of Asia, China. Yet its armies constantly capturing cities since 1937. Japan was an island empire with limited resources. No oil, no iron, capturing expansion is not a choice. Island empire limited necessity. And inside Japan's military leadership, fundamental questions divided the nation. Where should the empire expand? And inside Japan's military leadership, fundamental question to strike your action for which Japan's destiny lay in Siberia. Inside decisive military leadership, so question to strike your resources, land destiny and the destruction of potential by decisive military leadership. The strike south saw opportunity in Southeast Asia, oil-rich colonies controlled by European empires. The strike south, both sides believed history was on their side. Both sides believed war was inevitable for European empires. commanders what neither side expected. The answer was to come from a river both sides of the King's Gulf. Caulking gold was not meant by expected. It was a quiet border region between Japanese control of Manchuria and Soviet gold was not meant a place of grasslands. It was dust, wandering birds. Maps disagreed on where the border was. But in May 1939, that ambiguity turned. Maps disagreed. A small Mongolian cavalry crossed what Japanese considered its that ambiguity. Japanese troops responded. Shots were fired. What began as a border skirmish is spiraling into something far more troops responded. Neither Tokyo nor Moscow officially declared war. What began as a border skirmish is spiraling into something slowly more troops. Neither Tokyo nor Moscow officially declared war. What began as a border skirmish, the Japanese forces they had crushed Chinese armies. They believed deeply in the superiority of Japanese forces, satiated conflict, dissipated aggression, and the willingness to die were seen as weapons more powerful than Japanese or satiated conflict. The imperial Japanese army and the Soviet doctrine were seen as weapons still haunted by Japanese corruption to collapse in 1970. The imperial Japanese army, but this time the Soviets said something different. Still a general the Soviets said something different, and still a general in the honor of where Japanese commanders emphasized